Okay, Representative Woodard. Thank you. Representative Smith.
Mr. Chair, just a comment. President Emporia and Heather, you two remind me of football coaches. Football coaches are really good about sharing ideas and listening to what other people do. You guys are here every day and you're hearing what others do. And I think that's wonderful. I think everybody should not, the president can't always be here, but they should have somebody here because you really do hear good ideas from different places and so forth. So really appreciate you always being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Smith, and extend that welcome to everybody that is visiting with us or visiting us today. First, starting off, I'd like to welcome to the podium our fiscal analyst, Brianna Horton, who is going to give us a budget analysis, starting off with Pittsburg State University. That's who will lead off the presentation today, but then Wichita State. So she's going to be doing both at the beginning and going over each budget analysis. And so we'll hold our questions until she's done, and then we'll move on with our presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Just as I stated earlier this week, I'm just going to read over the small little budget analysis that are in the back of my big BA, just so you have an understanding for the universities. So I'm going to start with Pittsburg State. You should have a piece of paper like this. At the bottom, it says the agency requests an operating budget of $114.6 million, including $48.6 million SGF for fiscal year 2025. This is an all funds decrease of $890,302 or 0.8%, including an SGF decrease of $794,000 or 1.9% below the FY 2024 estimate. The decreases are all in all expenditure categories, and the governor concurs with the agency's request for fiscal year 2025. And then you should have another one for Wichita State.
Does anybody else need any other copies? You should have one copy for Pittsburg State and one for Wichita State. So if you don't have that, please ask a committee assistant. Thank you. Brianna, you may continue.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
The agency requests an operating budget of $756.6 million, including $106.1 million SGF for fiscal year 2025. This is an all funds increase of $1.5 million or was 0.2%, and an SGF decrease of $1.1 million or 1.5% below the FY 2024 revised estimate. The increase is primarily due to increased expenditures and contractual services for 1.9 and partially offsetting decreases in capital outlay with 2.4 million. And the governor concurs with the agency's request for fiscal year 2025. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Brianna. Questions from the committee? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do these numbers, do they include all the enhancement requests from the Board of Regents and from all the governor's requests? Is all that included in here, or is that something that's separate?
This is separate, so this is just for the universities for their operating expenditures.
Okay, so we would have to go back and look at that to see if there was something in Pittsburg State from the Board of Regents as far as an enhancement request.
Correct. So the Pittsburg State had an enhancement for $2 million for the American Reading Facility, and then they have a request with Fort Hays State and Emporia State for the regional. There's a regional request for $9 million for the three regions.
Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So educate me on the Wichita State budget, why there is an increase in the overall funds, but a decrease in the SGF.
I will sit back down on my computer and get back to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Brianna, could you also share with the committee where tuition dollars would be found in which bucket of,
So at the bottom, under fee funds, you'll see general fees. And so that general fees means tuition. And so also in the big BA that I gave you, there's a comparison of the tuition from all the universities. And I think back to 2023. But general fees is on both of these pieces of paper, and that's the tuition.
thank you, Brianna. And I'll give the committee just another little bit of time here in case you have any questions. It's a lot of information to review, so I'll give you another few seconds here. Representative Rajas.
Thank you. Brad, I just want to make sure, okay. So the tuition only in both of these, general fees is just tuition, then the restricted fees or the student, or any other fee associated, is that right?
Restricted fees it's just another set of funds that they have for specific purposes, kind of like special revenue where it's just for this.
Okay, and then maybe the presidents can explain that for sure on the breakdown, because I think that's probably tied in with fees for classes, but also those other general fees. So it's all restricted fees are just that everything's earmarked. Is that a good way to put it? Okay, I just want to make sure that that's. I guess I hadn't paid that close attention to why the general fees were tuition, those other things. So that's strictly that's all it is. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Brianna? Any questions online? Okay, if not, thank you, Brianna, for the presentation today. Next, I'd like to welcome to the committee, President of Pittsburgh State University, President Schiff. Welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and our distinguished members. Appreciate a little time to be with you today. I want to clarify what my colleagues are doing now. So you gave them a lot of kudos for that. They're really sign stealing is what they're doing. And so they're under investigation for that. So I'd like that noted in the minutes. No, we love our colleagues. We're glad they're here with us. You know, this, I feel bad for some of you if you've seen this already, but some of you haven't. So I'm going to do my best to bring us through this. That is the one-pager leave behind that we're showing on the screen right now. We have a slide deck that you'll see. It looks like this. This would be the start of that. And you should have those hard copies too. And so I never really worry if it comes on. That's kind of a double word score if it does. If not, I'll play the game here with you of this is the sheet that I'm talking about. You know, we have 5,700 students that are part of Guerrilla Nation. And really, does everybody have that before I launch off our packet of materials? You do, right? Okay. So 5,700 students, what's occupied our time, you'll remember last year when I was here with you, this is now my second year as president of Pitt State, proud to be there, representing Guerrilla Nation. And what I said last year was we'd had about a 10-year decline in enrollment. That is something that all of us are grappling with to some extent in a regional rural universities. It's not a surprise. Well, good news is over the last 2 years, we have notched up a little bit in our first-time full-time enrollment. So that's really great. There's a lot more work that we're doing to make sure that we're affordable and accessible to all students in the state of Kansas, certainly within Southeast Kansas. That's really our hometown, right? To do right by that region. But you also need us to do really well within this 4-state corner of the world. And I would even argue 5 states down into Texas. What's important about that, and you probably all know this, is that our states that are in our adjacency, they're not waiting for us to be competitive. They're coming to steal Kansas students every day. And so we have to figure out new ways to connect more and more students with a Kansas education. Certainly for us, it's Pitt State. So we have to get, you'll hear me say a lot, rowdy with the details so that we can open up those opportunities and brain gain for the state. Obviously, we've had a lot of successes over the last couple of years with bringing new companies to Kansas. We need to fill those jobs. And so we need to be really successful with not only educating our students within the state, we have to be really smart about also growing those future students and workers in the state of Kansas. So we're focused on Southeast Kansas, the state of Kansas, but we're also looking to grab some market share from students in other states. When you look at our composition, about 70% of our students come from Kansas. That won't surprise you. We're enrolling a majority of our students in high demand fields. You can see that identified on the sheet. Doubt that it would be surprising that construction and nursing and biology and education, psychology, manufacturing is really in our strike zone. And so we're continuing to work with students in those programs in significant ways. What you'll know too is that I think important that we have a growing group of first generation students, students from underrepresented backgrounds. I believe this year we are close to 25%. That actual number, most likely moving forward, is probably 30-35% as we service and support students from all different backgrounds. 94% of the students are from 5 states. So you'll see that. That's, again, important within the 4 states. But Texas, you'll note there will be a lot of institutions, not only in the state of Kansas, but all throughout the Midwest that have set up recruiting posts in Texas. I mean, the real story there is Texas has more students than they do have institutions to educate. And so it's a real market opportunity for us if we can connect them to our right program supporting industry in Southeast Kansas. Okay, so how do we leverage some of that unique value? You know, you're going to hear me talk a little bit about our AA degrees and some of the work that we've done within KBOR to create, I think, a really unique opportunity for students at Pitt State. We have a flat rate tuition. You'll remember me talking about that last year. Really helps students move through their degree program and completion in expedited ways. So we're seeing that happen on our campus. We have a $0, right, application fee. We haven't been charging an application fee for a long time. And I think that gets to, you know, so many times we have more and more students, you know, our biggest competitor. Who's our biggest competitor? It's students that can go to college that are choosing not to go to college. And that's throughout the state. That's throughout the Midwest. It's a real issue for higher education throughout the country. So how do you compete with that? You certainly don't want to put barriers up in front of students, right? So creating an easy entry, whether you're at the technical college, community college, or a 4-year institution like Pitt State. So that's something we're really focused on. I'll give you a really good example, anecdote. This might blow your hair back a little bit. Last year at this time, we're analyzing every part of the operation. We found that we had 85 different units on campus that could place a hold on a student account. And when you have a hold on your account, it could be financial, it could be discipline, it could be I broke a Erlenmeyer flask in my chemistry course. I haven't paid that off yet. I haven't turned in my football helmet. That may sound like that it's far-fetched, but we had 85 different units that could put a hold on a student account. So then if you're a student, what do? You run around trying to find somebody that represents that area to release that hold. Some holds are very necessary. Well, guess what? In 1 year's time, we reduced all those holds to 4. And we created a new streamlined process for students so it would be easy to resolve. In a way, we've built a concierge support for our students that they just go to one place, have somebody help me with this hold. That's a huge improvement in 1 year. That wasn't easy. There's a lot of spider webs connected to all those holds, as you can imagine, on a college campus. But I use that as an example because I think it speaks to how higher ed has to think different, right? sometimes we get in our own way, and that impacts student success and family success. So that's what you can expect from Pitt State, is we're looking, I think President Hush always talks about looking under every rock. We're looking under every rock, and we're looking under it again. So there's a lot of work that's happening on our campus. Really proud of the work our faculty, staff, and others are doing within the community to support our institution. You'll see, moving on to rethinking what it looks like for regional higher ed success in Kansas. I believe you should be proud of the work we're doing. We are, there's a lot more than our limited time to talk about, but there's some things that I would highlight for you. We're leading Kansas in improving literacy outcomes. This is hugely important to the state, to the prosperity of the state. As you know, we have about 4 out of 10 little people in this state that don't read at level. That's a real concern, because think of what that does to their progress in education and then into their life. I'm dyslexic. I grew up really struggling to read. I would have been one of those 4 out of 10. Back in my day, we didn't really know what we know now. And I'm proud that at Pitt State, we have national leading faculty that are showing the way on how we improve pedagogy, how we work to teach teachers how to teach young people how to read. So we have some of the answers right at Pitt State. I'm really proud of the work that our team's doing. You know, we are looking for partnerships wherever we can find them. We want to be very connected to our community. We are. I think that's something that even drew me to the job at Pitt State, is how connected the university is to the community. We've had projects like Block 22 that have revitalized downtown Pittsburgh and has starting to grow an economic impact for the entire downtown district. We have a partnership opportunity that I'm sure you've heard a little bit about with the KBI. Happy to address questions on that later, but really important to note that the KBI has identified Southeast Kansas as a really important target for improving their staffing and addressing challenges for everything from fentanyl to human trafficking. And so they asked us last year if we wouldn't be interested in partnering in a similar way to how Washburn is working with them here in Topeka. And I jumped out of my seat. Absolutely. How can we help build the workforce of tomorrow as it relates to forensic science and certainly criminal justice? So we have a lot of opportunity there, and hopeful that the KBI's proposal moves forward. From an accountability standpoint, remember last year I came to you and I said, hold us accountable. And one of those things was we were going to try to rethink our approach to student success. And one of those things that we really did that I'm proud of this last year is the Board of Regents approved our proposal for an associate's degree for all students that attend Pitt State that earn through their gen ed requirements about 60 credit hours. So guess what? It's automatically conferred. You don't have to apply for anything separate. And we know that that's going to lead to far more success in students getting that initial successful completion to earning then their bachelor's degree, which is really what they're there to do. But it creates an important, I think for all of you to know, it didn't cost us an extra $1 to do that. What we have done is prioritize student achievement to create, in a way, a safety net for them. So how many stories do you have from neighbors and constituents where it's like, well, I went to college and I paid a bunch of money and I didn't end up with anything? That's a real problem when 50% of our students don't graduate with anything to show for it and own a bunch of money. And there are story after story. Just ask around your neighborhood. Well, we're changing that now. So our projection is we'll have between 75%, 80% of all Pitt State students will earn their first credential on their way to earning their second. That's so important, not only for those families and those students. When we think about workforce in the state, well, the number one metrics that new companies look at, percentage of educated workforce. And so if the best we can do is say, well, 1 out of 2 of students that actually went to higher education graduate, it's not near good enough. we can do way better. So I feel proud of the work that our faculty and our teams have done. Pitt State, feel like we're leading the way, and that was approved for all of our KBOR institutions. I promised that I would talk a little bit about last year that we were working on a special project. We call it Guerrilla Rising. It is building off of our success in our community campus initiative, Block 22, expanding it down an entire city block. And instead of just building the College of Business on campus, we got together with city and private partners and have advanced a project that will build a new College of Business in right downtown Pittsburgh. And in doing so, add another 70 beds for students to live right in the downtown, primarily College of Business students. So living, learning right in the area they're trying to develop and grow with business partners. And we have a historic Fox Theater that, as part of this project, will now get completed. It's been, Coach knows, it's been 20 some years that they've been trying to get that project done. And so now the hotel, the theater, and the College of Business, that construction begins this spring and will be done by 2026. It's a historic investment and a vote for Pittsburgh. To the next slide. This is part of it. I mentioned already our work around leading and literacy. That speaks to where we have niches at a regional university of where we can do things that can really advance the industry and the communities that we serve. And so our reading center currently serves about 500 families and their students every year. Because of generous state support last year, we're going to be able to expand that, not only within the region, within the city of Pittsburgh, but to outside the region throughout the state. Because again, our researchers have a recipe that can really help young people. So that's really important. Next slide. We're also looking at all of our strategies. I love that President Hush is here. I'll say this. Wherever we can be more efficient, we are looking under all those rocks. Good example of that is we've identified between Emporia State and Pitt State positions that we might be able to share, right? So think about that. Do we have, I always think of back of the house positions that are in support compliance roles. Well, why don't we start looking collectively at sharing some of those responsibilities to buy down the cost of administrative overhead? So that, I think, speaks to the health of KBOR and that the regional universities are really partnering wherever they can to stay afloat. So that's important. I think good for you all to know. There's many other examples, but I think that's a good one to share. Next slide. So this was the request that we put forward this year for Pitt State. Some of that lives in the overall KBOR request. So when you think about the student success initiatives, we grew our first to second year retention on campus this last year. A lot of this having to do with a centralized advising approach and a whole new center that those funds made possible. We grew that almost 4%. I mean, that's in 1 year. Now, it's not just because of that, but I can tell you that it's making a huge difference for students already. You're not running around to try to find an answer. One place, one group of people that are lifeguards to support your success. So it's already having an impact. We had a request for science lab upgrades. We probably, honest truth is we probably have $30 million worth of science labs to improve, but we tried to go right to the heart of where we think we could partner state and federal funds, five from the state, 5 from the feds, to focus on the most impactful renovations. And so we have to get started with it because, again, we have students coming from all over. Certainly, if you're coming from Johnson County, there's a lot of students that will show up in our science labs, and their junior high facilities were more relevant to their educational experience than some of our current science labs. It's a real problem. So we have to invest in those labs. I've talked about the reading facility. We put forward The most important ask here from Pitt State, it's not currently in the budget being proposed, but it's something that we felt was really important, and that is to begin to address some of the financial trauma over the last 20 years. And so we had requested $3 million per institution of the regionals. We're one of the three for this year, and we're asked actually $6 million total. We were asked to split up that $6 million, 3 this year, 3 next year, as an investment in our regional budget gap. We have about an $11 million budget gap that's grown over time. We feel that we've been scrappy in how we've addressed the pressure of enrollment, inflation, challenges within our rural market. But we feel like this, at some point, you're going to cut straight through the bone. And I think there's an obligation for us to raise those issues to you. An investment in your regional institutions is really critical. You can have craters or propellers. And so we advocate for propellers. And we're ready to continue to do that work at Pitt State. So that was fast and furious. I probably went too long, but would be, you see the last page of me riding a bike this summer. That wasn't just a publicity stunt. This was a student-born idea, and students challenged me to get on a bike and ride across the state and meet a bunch of wonderful people, and to raise a bunch of money and for student scholarships. So, when you think of some of that $6 million that we're requesting over the next 2 years, where does that money go? Some of that money goes right back to scholarships and making sure that opportunities for students are there and present at the university. But yeah, we're serious about it. So I certainly wouldn't have sat all that time to go across the state, even though I loved it. It was amazing and great. We raised $7.7 million in 10 days. That's a historic commitment from our donors that care about our students at Pittsburgh. So, okay, so I'd be happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, President. Appreciate that, and the success of that bike ride seems like it yielded a nice return on your sweat equity, I suppose. So we'll go to questions. My Vice Chair, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, President. So, what do you consider your peer institutions?
Well, I knew you'd ask that question. We have a set of KBOR peer institutions, Brianna. I don't know could we share that back with you? We're happy to provide those. So those are dedicated peer institutions per institution.
I mean, like, for example, is Washburn a peer institution?
I don't believe they are on that list. Are you remembering? So I think it's, yeah. So it's outside of Kansas. So it would be like Central Missouri, I believe, is on there for us. Would be one of them.
Okay.
Northwest, I believe, is too, Missouri.
Now, you were talking about helping revitalize downtown, and obviously putting up the School of Business is a big part of that. Are you doing other things to help revitalize downtown Pittsburgh?
My gosh, yes. That occupies a lot of our time. One of the things that the city, when Block 22 was the whole idea was hatched for that, agreed to put about $1.8 million into it. So think of small business development in and around the region now has a foothold right in downtown as part of that Block 22 investment. So we have staff, we have an entire division dedicated to economic prosperity of the region. That changed just this last year. So think of that $1.8 million investment. We had it studied where it's returning over $2 million a year back to the community. So that's an example, but we have faculty in the College of Business, for example, that are working with independent businesses all throughout the community. It's in our DNA.
One last question. So I want to talk about the concept of a completer. And you, by full disclosure, we had dinner last night. Yeah. You were talking about how there were people who attended for 2 years and had nothing to show for it at the end of 2 years. So if you've addressed that issue by offering an associate degree, My question would be, if somebody comes in with the intention of attending 4 years, but then after 2, say that's it, are they considered a completer even though they didn't complete what they intended to do when they came in?
I'd answer that by saying they are to our administration, they are to the families and those students. If we want to get into technically, there's an IPEDS reporting system, may or may not be tracking that. I think that we will now push forward, and there was a meeting this last month where we had staff that are advancing the notion that we should be talking about completion, first completion, second completion, as we build stackable degrees across the 4 years. I think we have to loosen our thinking around that, because again, a successful completion adds to your next completion, right? And so for us, we're going to view it as first completion, AA degree, moving toward your bachelor's degree.
Okay, and this is my final question. So explain to us the impact that the adding the AA degree has had.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We have, I wish I should have printed out some emails to share with you from former students and what it means to them. So not only we have later this month, we have 1,000 students at Pitt State that will be receiving this AA degree in a special celebration ceremony.
And they'll be walking across.
It'll be a little different. We're going to do a little different. We want to do it. We're not going to have a formal commencement, but it's going to be a celebration for those students so they feel that that's their first taste of success.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Next, we'll go to Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few more. You're not done yet.
I'm not done, right? Okay.
Go through a few of them.
Got it.
Let's talk about on the restricted fee on the fee funds. Tuition looks like is somewhat stable, at least as we look at your budget analysis, but your fees went down. Excuse me, it's $9,000. What happened? I mean, was that a shift in change, a shift in fees charging for the classes, or was it an accounting thing?
No, I saw that. I think it's accounting. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I can get back to you on it, but we haven't made a major shift there for that.
That's what I wondered, Mr. Chairman. With our regionals, they're all kind of known uniquely for something, and Pittsburgh has always been one: construction, engineering, that type of thing. Talk about the future. Talk about AI, how that's going to be impacting some of those core projects and programs that you have at Pitt State.
Yeah, no, that's a really good thought. Well, it is, and this is where the faculty kind of do their magic, right? Is to be able to take AI, for example, as a topic and weave that into the curriculum, right? So I know there's a group of faculty that are already talking about we have the humanities. What do the technical humanities look like, right? So how do you connect it to industry and a subject around technology like this that will be forever changing the lives of society, of members of society. So I think this is where that happens, is that this is our faculty working on how do we develop a new academic emphasis. Maybe it's a major, maybe it's a minor, maybe it's a stackable credential. That is, think of a weekend boot camp, right? Opposed to a degree program. So academic architecture is more important today than it ever has been. I think very true to say that our institutions, four-year institutions, have changed, some more slowly than others. And so to be able to get on top of that, I think you have to build a nimble system on your campus with your faculty to respond to those changes in society. So I'm confident we have that group on our campus that's working through this. I'm excited to see it. I'll give you a good example. We have some of our graphic art students and faculty. I don't even know if, trust me, I can't do this, but you could utilize an AI tool to render. I could say, give me a portrait of Coach Smith. Suddenly, it would take no less than 2 to 3 minutes and I'd have it. And I could turn that in as an assignment. Well, right, that could be viewed the negative angle of AI, but the positive is I want you to work with these different AI tools and come back with a composite portrait of Coach Smith through the years. And then as long as you're disclosing that, right, that this was done, rendered, we asked the question in this appropriate way, it begins to change how you orient that as a tool to be used, kind of questioning, making sure you're asking the right questions and filtering the technology. So that's a real moment that's happening right now with some of our courses, from art to the humanities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll sit with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And maybe that's something we can put in the budget to get a rendering of Coach Smith as part of the budget request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, President. If I could ask 3 or 4 questions and come back later if there's time. What a blessing to have Blake Benton on the Board of Regents. I think that's a real plus for any college. The Fox Theater, is that going to be owned by the college?
It will. Yep. So it'll be think of it as part of the College of Business. There will be a large auditorium, a multi-use space that the college will use, but the community will use as well.
Lonnie showed me around, showed me ideas. I don't know if they'll go with those ideas.
Yeah.
Could I ask you about the Best Motel?
Yeah.
Are you guys looking at that as possible housing for students?
It will. It's part of the project, and actually allows us to pull in a lot of historical tax credits as part of the overall project. So there's again, how do you make that type of a project work? It takes pulling from every angle financially for a small regional to make that work. It'll be about 70 beds for students that want to live in the downtown area. It'll be a lot of upper level business students.
It's pretty awesome. It's an awesome building. And then I was looking the last several days, we've listened to other colleges talk, and I look at our Pell Grant eligibility, 28%. It seemed like everybody else is higher than that. And yet we're one of the poorest counties in the state in Crawford County. I was surprised it was that low.
Well, if you were to come to my conference room, you'd see a bullseye of how we're low in that number and how do we reach out more to make sure that students know that it's an accessible option for them. I think our biggest competition, Representative Smith, is not with other universities, it's with students not going to college. And so we have to be smart with our financial aid, our recruitment strategy, because students that would bring a lot of that Pell with them, if they're choosing not to come, it's saying something about their connection to higher education.
Washburn made a comment yesterday that 62% of their students were women. It's because the men are not going to school for what you just said. So, and I'm really interested in that reading center. Is it teachers learning and going out, or is it students at the college also taking it and getting to be better readers also?
All above, right? So the testing and evaluation of young people will take place right there. It can also be an observation place for current teachers that might not be as integrated in their background with the science of reading. So they would have a chance to come in and see professionals evaluate young people and then help them with intervention strategies. So it's an important investment in not just supporting families and students, future gorillas, but to make sure that teachers that are out in the field now can boost their skills so they can be more effective in the classroom.
One more question, if I could, Mr. Chair. I feel like reading, like you say, if you're behind, you'll be behind forever. So I think it's a great program. And then there's been a lot of talk about a possible new FBI building coming to Pittsburgh, and that can only add to the economy and to the college and the whole area. There's so many needs, and I think it'll be people that will get jobs after they finish those programs. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
From the university's perspective, it's what we should be doing, right? Is meeting a market demand with forensic scientists and criminal justice majors. And so it's a chance for us to grow enrollment. So I see it as very positive. But it's also, it goes back to partnering. It's how we do right by the region. And so you know as well as I do the crime statistics on fentanyl, meth use, human trafficking. There's a whole corridor that runs from Kansas City down to the border, and we're in kind of a ground zero target. And so I don't want to do Director Mativi's job, right? He can speak to that from the KBI's perspective, but I like the idea of a double word score for the campus, the community, is probably triple for the entire region in making sure that we can have folks feel safe at home.
Thank you, Dr. Ship. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. You must be a Scrabble player.
I am, yes.
Very good. Very good. Time for a few more questions. We'll go to Representative Amix, then Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and President Schiff. Good to see you again. Last time I saw you were in Lawrence, Kansas as part of your bicycle trip.
I was sweating, right? Yeah.
You were a little warm that evening. But I did want to say one thing, and listening to a number of my friends and neighbors that were at that event and how much they appreciated you talking about the associate's degree, you know, as they're earned, and how much that would mean to a number of families that do have that feeling that maybe they spent money, you know, in a way that they didn't see much success out of it. So that was talked, you know, about quite a bit, you know, amongst people that I visited with. So I think you all to be commended on that. I think it's just a real positive way to be able to talk about education. Another thing is my background is local government, and your investment in your downtown in any college town is something that can be really of a great success as you look at partnerships that exist in college towns, you know, throughout the state of Kansas and probably pretty much anywhere. So thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, President Ship. Sorry. I'm concerned about the 4 out of 10 not reading to grade level. I want to know, and probably not fair to ask you, and you can be willingly say, I don't want to answer this. How much is that due to the lack of working on reading skills in our K through 12? I mean, there's got to be a percentage that would have dyslexia or other problems that, you know, you really need more help with. And I'm not talking about those kids that, you know, if you have dyslexia or some other kind of reading disability, by all means, you need help. So are you willing to answer that?
Well, I am. Yeah, I'm the wrong person to ever say you don't answer it. I always answer it with an open heart, right? So I think that's what's important. We have, you know, first, before you get into policy or curriculum advances, any of that stuff, right? We have amazing teachers, right, who many times overburdened, underpaid. We know all this. And they're always looking for better ways to do what they do. And so every once in a while, something comes along that really takes you a light year ahead over a current pedagogy and teaching. And really, the science of reading has proven to be that next big step for educators. So we need to not demonize anybody who's out in the field that's learned how to teach reading a certain way. That's not the point of it. I think it's how do we help people become better at what they do, what they want to do. The teachers that we've been working with in and around Southeast Kansas and in Pittsburgh, they're excited, right? Because they've always known that there are some students that they just can't reach. I wish I had, you know, different tools in my tool belt to help reach those students. Well, when it comes to the science of reading and reading education, we've really taken a jump ahead. So we now have to figure out ways, and we have a team of folks, some of them with me today, who are working with the legislature to propose policy amendments, changes with the Board of Education. I think this is where we all have to get rowdy together. I think if you were to show on the screen, and believe me, we did one of these things last week where you kind of map out how do we get all this done so that we can get that 4 out of 10 erased. And at one point I just said, oh my gosh, here's what I care about. It's 4 to 10 little people that need to be improved to level. Let's figure it out. And that means everybody kind of getting rid of their egos and just concentrating on that, because think of what that will do for the state, right? So, I mean, if you were to do a survey of prisoners, how many of you can't read at level? Guarantee it's a lot. So you can begin to see the trailing effects of what that leads to, right? When you can't read at level. And again, I was one of those kids. So I know what it feels like to be the student in the room that you're like, I don't ask me to read in public because I'm gonna feel like I'm dumb. And then you go further and further into a shell. The work that our Center for Reading is doing in Pittsburgh, just watch the students as they progress. They go from looking down at the floor, answering questions as they look down at the floor, to looking up, feeling that they have control of their education and their learning environment. And that's reading, right? So my answer is, the answers are, we know what to do. What we need to do now is there's little magic of policy development, a little cooperation between school districts, Board of Education. Like, everybody needs to come together around this. And this needs to be the best state in the country where young people learn how to read.
I agree. Thank you, President Shipp, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, President Shipp. I think that's an inspiring message to conclude the presentation today, but I do appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Next, I'd like to welcome to the podium President of Wichita State University, President Muma.
Thank you, Chairman Howe. Members of the committee, I saw some of you earlier today at appropriations and appreciate you showing up again to hear me talk. You should have this document in front of you and then this little fact card as well, which has more data that you can refer to later on. So as you know, WSU aspires to be the most innovative urban public research university. And what that means is two things. That we're there to provide affordable, accessible education to anybody in our community and the state. And we're also there to solve problems for our community through research, through creative activities, and other service type initiatives. And every day we are driven by three priorities, and that is affordability and access, helping businesses with their talent needs, and increasing economic prosperity for our state. So if you go to the second slide, in terms of affordability and access and that particular priority, you'll see that we've been growing, and we have been for a while, both on the WSU campus and the WSU Tech campus. In the last 10 years, the WSU campus has grown by 20%, and the WSU Tech campus has grown by 32%. Combined, that's about a 30% growth over the last 10 years. This is because of many reasons. Sedgwick County is growing, and we're prioritizing citizens there. We're keeping our price point affordable compared to our peers, and we're using need-based aid that you're giving us, along with our own institutional dollars that we've been investing in these students. We're helping fill that gap that students have in their financial need to go to college. So many students have some resources, but they don't have the full amount of resources to go to school. And that's the gap that we're trying to fill. From funds that you have approved over the last 2 years, which is about $6.5 million, we've increased the population of students awarded by an additional 2,129 students. That's not near enough, as many of our students come from low-income backgrounds, or first-generation students. We have a large minority Hispanic population. Many of those are under-resourced students. That's the future as they're coming out of high school these days. So you go to slide 3, and there's a little bit of a discrepancy here on this slide and the slide that the Board of Regents presented to you. But Kansas is in the bottom of per capita spending in our region. Actually, it's $207 per capita in Kansas. From what this slide doesn't reflect is the investment that you all made last year. But nevertheless, it's still lower than the region. And we're very appreciative of what you all have been appropriating to us. And it's obviously helped from what I mentioned earlier, the over 2,000 students, additional students served. But we need more to help fill jobs, get more people in the state to fill those jobs and grow our economy. The governor, in her recommendation, she has put in there $14.1 million to bring us up to the regional average. And we are supportive of that and encourage you all to think about supporting that as well. States around us are investing many more millions of dollars, and this is going to just continue to make us less competitive as we go forward if that additional dollars are not invested. We also support the additional $9.5 million request by the governor to continue to support retention and student success efforts, making sure once we recruit students, they enroll and stay and ultimately graduate. And if you look on slides 4, 5, and 6, your handout, you can see the success that we've had already and the $1.5 million that we got of the total $8.5 million that you approved last year. Their increased success will keep them progressing in college, and the whole point is for improvement in their academic performance. That's the best predictor of whether they graduate. My colleague, Dr. Shipp, talked about the AA degree that they're awarding. We've been awarding associate degrees for 25, 30 years. And once a student reaches that 60-hour threshold, they also get an associate degree. We just recently, last week, had a celebration for our students that we awarded to this spring. This is what it means to students. The student came up to get her diploma, and she came over to me and said, I had no idea that I was going to get this and that I had met this criteria, but this is what this means to me. I'll get a promotion in my current job and I'll make more money. This is a best practice across the nation to encourage students to continue on to get a bachelor's degree. But if life happens and they have to drop out, at least they'll have that associate degree. We believe these dollars, the student success dollars that we're requesting, we will not need to continue to requesting this in the long run because we'll have infrastructure in place to keep students in school. And in that case, the revenues will be coming in from those students who stay. This brings me to my second priority, and that's filling the talent pipeline. We think we're doing a good job at this. Our enrollment growth is fueling this, as I've already discussed. 70% of our students are from South Central region of the state, and more than 70% of our undergraduates stay in Kansas and work after they graduate. Nearly all of WSU Tech's students stay in Kansas and work after they graduate. But as you know, Kansas is not a growing population, and we know that we need to do more. And that's why we started recruiting students up and down the I-35 corridor. So if you go to slide 7, and we have expanded that initiative beyond that corridor to many millions of more students, potential students. And this is actually increased by 237% since we started doing this. So for many years, we had 200-300 students coming from those areas. Now we have over 1,400 students coming each fall. And coming to Wichita State, staying in Kansas, taking jobs, supporting our economy. They're also getting connected to applied learning opportunities with our Innovation Campus partners and others in the community, and staying in Kansas to work, obviously after graduation. And nearly 50% of these out-of-state students are staying after they graduate and working in the state of Kansas. If you look at slides 8, 9, and 10, this is also giving students availability of hands-on jobs in our disciplines, and over about 9,000 students are earning over $35 million. So once hired, that's a shortened time for employers to onboard them, which is also a benefit to the employers, but also our graduates. We'd like to expand this. We obviously are awarding several $1 million to students along the way. Again, this is a best practice to keep students in the classroom and the experiential opportunities that they have. But there are some experiences that don't pay students to work in them. We see this as an opportunity to help those students, but also help these small businesses that can't afford to do that, to build a talent pool to help them grow their business as well. So for the final priority, increasing economic prosperity for our community and state, again, we do this by solving problems for industry, like NIAR, solving problems with NIAR, aviation in the NIAR area. Our students are central to this, participate in applied learning experiences alongside professionals in those businesses, agencies, and other areas. All of this helps to address local workforce and community issues and helps to grow the Kansas economy. So as a measure of our success, and if you go to slide 11, you can see that we've had a 241% increase in research expenditures since 2020. This past year, we surpassed 260 million in research expenditures. And a significant portion of that funding is with our industry partners, helping them solve those pressing issues, as I've mentioned. And we're expecting to surpass $370 million this next year when we report. So what that means is that we're number one in industry-funded aerospace R&D, and you can see this on slides 12 and 13. We're number two in industry-funded engineering research and development. Number three overall in aerospace R&D. Number 10 in industry-funded R&D, all categories. And number 13 in all engineering research and development expenditures in the country. And this is among all universities. This is helping actually fuel our economy in a significant way in Wichita and the state. So as we continue to invest in our projects that we believe will grow our workforce and economic prosperity, I want to thank you for last year, the $142 million that the legislature approved for the Wichita Biomedical Campus, which is a joint project with KU and WSU Tech, where we're bringing all of our health disciplines together in one facility. As you may have been aware, there was an unintentional trigger that caused a $41 million reduction of that appropriation. We would ask that you consider the original legislative intent be followed and add that $41 million back into this year's appropriation. That's also currently reflected in the governor's recommendation. So in closing, there's four things that we really want to stress that is important to help grow the Kansas population, grow the economy, and that's the need-based aid, the Student Success Initiative, our applied learning request, and again, the Wichita Biomedical Campus request. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, President. Appreciate your update and presentation testimony. We'll go to committee questions. Start off with Representative Rogers.
President, always good to see you. A couple things right quick, just maybe updates. Is the Innovation Campus, is that last phase complete? Is it full?
No, it's not full. Technically, there's 3 plots of land on what you would probably see as Innovation Campus, but we're going through a master planning process. There's further ways to densify that. There's a lot of parking over there that we could add some additional partners. We're also developing along 17th Street that provides another opportunity. So we have a lot of opportunities to further densify that.
To a year or two or something, that was kind of what it was. You know, that one of those phases where you were building and had a lot of occupancy. I don't know if it was full yet, but there's still opportunity for expansion.
Oh yeah. We just finished an additional partnership building, and that's almost leased out already. So each time we finish one, we add another one.
Have you seen? You've been a part of the American Athletic Conference for a while. Have you seen that? I mean, I remember was one of the first years you came to us and the I-35 thing, those numbers are outstanding, getting students to come, along the corridor here and now expanding that to we're all over. But what about being part of that conference? And, have you been able to see outreach and maybe bring students from some of those other areas that you're being exposed to that you weren't before?
A little bit. So the conference is in really 2 parts of the country, in sort of the Midwest, all the way basically up and down the I-35 corridor, and then on the East Coast. It certainly gives us exposure to that market when we go there to, the Tampa market and the, in the past it was the Orlando market, but now the Boca Raton market and of course the Philadelphia market. We have opportunities to do things together as institutions, and we've done that. And our alumni folks have been meeting together with other partners, also our missions folks and our research folks. So it helps. We are all kind of similar institutions, so that going to make sense. Most of our growth is really, from Houston all the way up to Kansas City, Omaha area.
Quickly. Okay. And this is primarily just for athletics. I know like others, like the Big Ten, they sure love academic things as well. Are there academic ties in with this conference as well as it's strictly athletics?
Well, we're all urban public research universities, so that, and you'll see that slide there, some of the relationship there. So yes, in that way we are.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I had a few questions. One, you had mentioned about the associate's degree. That is something that Wichita State has done for a number of years. Is that because Wichita State used to be a municipal university and it had a little bit different flexibility?
No, we in the early 90s developed an Associate of Arts degree. We had several associate degrees across campus. Dental hygiene was one of those. Now it's a baccalaureate program. We had a legal assistant associate degree. So it's kind of been in our fabric all along. And we just have maintained that and actually utilize that as a way to, get students to have credentials.
Okay, thank you for that. And so the change that President Shipp had alluded to with KBOR's policy has to do with the general education and then getting an associate's because of the general education core requirements. Is that correct?
Well, I don't remember exactly what Dr. Shipp said about that. For us, it's an Associate of Arts degree. So generally, that's just general education. And that's always been the case. One of the things that the Board of Regents recently did is make sure that we all had the same kind of general education. So when students transfer in and out of our institutions, they don't have to, take additional courses and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, I had talked to you just a little bit before the hearing, and we had talked about reaching those first generation students and specifically the Hispanic population of folks that might be first generation immigrant to Kansas. And is there a specific way that you've had success in reaching new populations of people? And, do you have a staff that are bilingual on your admissions team and they're out in the field and connecting with new people? Could you kind of share a little bit about that?
Yeah, just so everybody understands sort of the demographic makeup of our student body that's changed pretty rapidly in the last 10 years as basically the country's changing. And certainly that's happening in Kansas. But 1 in 4 of our freshmen identify as an underrepresented minority. 17% of our undergraduates identify as a Hispanic student. Nearly half of our undergraduates identify as first generation. So these students have a lot of needs. And so the main thing that we do to reach out to them is to provide as much institutional financial aid support to help them. But to your point about, do we have any other kinds of supportive activities? So in our missions area, we have bilingual folks. We have individuals specifically focused around those areas and coordinating that effort, both Hispanic languages and also, Spanish languages, but also Vietnamese is another big population in our community. We have different kinds of ways to support incoming students or prospective students by providing opportunities for them to have their entire family there. A lot of these students like to bring their parents and their grandparents to learn about what they might be doing in college. So we have that kind of support too. And then when they do get accepted and enroll and go to orientation, we also have bilingual activities and support for those students and their families.
Thank you, President. Other questions from the committee? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your tech program, does it allow high school kids to go to that?
WSU Tech? Yes. I would say that that's their main feeder of students into their professional programs that they have. And they have a huge high school program that helps to matriculate students into their technology programs.
I have a daughter that is a counselor in Wichita, and a lot of the Hispanic kids want to quit high school because they want to make money to help their families because their families are struggling. And boy, if we just if we could just get them to realize if you spend 2 years in that tech school, you're going to really help your families. And being bilingual, I would think that would help companies tremendously. You'd be the leaders in your company because you'd be able to communicate with everybody. So
Yeah, and pretty much all the 2-year schools have these strong connections to the high school. And so we have students that graduate at WSU Tech with a 2-year certificate or associate degree, but they also graduate from high school at the same time. So actually, I was at the commencement for WSU Tech this past year, and we had many students that were graduating from high school and actually graduating with some sort of credential from WSU Tech. So those kinds of efforts are meant to help strengthen that connection. And when students do want to drop out, at least they've had some sort of technical training or some sort of credential along those lines.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions from the committee? Yes, we'll go to Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Movement, you all receive city funds, municipal funds from Wichita?
Yes.
What percentage of that of your budget is that, of your?
It'd be about 10% of our SGF. So it's about $10 million. So that's probably 7% of our entire budget, somewhere around there.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Rogers.
Sharon, just looking at your operating budget, 23 to 24, up 74. I'm just kind of ballparking the numbers. Did you have more reserves in I guess you got we got about 20 million extra in state of probes, and then other sources cash. Is that just cash on hand, or was that other monies that are just they're ready to invest in other projects? Or
What line are you looking at?
I'm looking at an operating budget. I'm looking here, other sources cash.
Oh, that, okay.
Yeah, I mean, primarily it looks like that's maybe where a big part of that was, because, you know, again, with the money for the health that got out for that 24, just trying to.
So are you talking about the 10 million to 23 million?
Yes, yeah.
So that'd be private dollars from foundation, those sorts of resources.
Sure. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. President, could you also kind of back up on that $41 million for the Health Science Center and kind of explain a little bit kind of what's in the governor's budget recommendation and kind of why there is that glitch again?
Yeah, so last year, what was voted on was $142 million amount from ARPA dollars. And I think what happened was the members of legislature were concerned that they were going to overspend ARPA dollars. And so they put this stopgap measure in, which actually caused a decrease in $41 million. And that wasn't the original intent of what was passed. Everybody that's looked at it at the budget office and others, they said, yeah, that's not what was intended here. So that's what we're asking to correct this year.
Thank you. In your discussions with people in the legislature or the governor's office, has there been a hard commitment on how much the state was willing to obligate to that project? Because there's private sources, and I can't remember how much was federal.
Well, the original amount was $190 million. We also applied for Spark funds, and we were awarded another $15 million. So the total amount was $205 million.
Thank you. It's hard to remember from
Yeah.
a year ago what exactly transpired and some of the things that happened in the interim. So I do appreciate that. Any other questions from the committee? we do have a little bit of time, so. Representative
Sorry,
Rogers.
Don't mean to do that, but talk about those research dollars. Talk about that big jump over the last several years, especially. Is that one sector? Is that primarily aviation, or what is causing that?
Well, for 35 years, we've been helping industry do their R&D. And we figured out recently how to use digital transformation to help solve some of their biggest problems, and particularly some of their aging aircraft that they need to sustain. And we figured out how to digitize those and make them into digital twins so they can create models to print individual parts for those aircraft, because no one's keeping a stockpile of parts for 50 B-1 bombers, but they're going to continue to fly the B-1 bombers for another 40 years. So we've taken that technology and that expertise and that research know-how and have moved that into other areas, particularly in the military, but also in some other areas that are not Department of Defense related.
So then you are capitalizing on that for revenue back in, or
So
you're getting contracts?
All of those are contracts and research grants to help support that work. And as that work is finished, then we can move on to another project. The nice thing about our research model is it's not tied to a particular college or to a faculty member. We hire research scientists to work on projects. When the projects are finished, then those individuals don't work there anymore, or they go on to another project that we have at the university. So all of that growth in research dollars is to support that research and development for the military, for businesses, for other entities that need that kind of expertise. NIAR was put together 35 years to help support all the aircraft companies in Wichita. Actually, it started 75 years ago when the wind tunnel was put on our campus to help do research and development for all the aircraft companies that needed to look at aerodynamics and the wind. That's still there. That's still a lab that we use. So it just over the years and the basic research that's done to support that has kind of snowballed into this very large operation that employs hundreds of students, and of course, hundreds of professionals, engineers, business folks, others to help support that effort.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Representative. I had another question, President Muma. When we received this budget analysis, some of the money is in KBOR's budget, but does pass through to the universities. And part of that is the capital improvement request. And so the governor's FY25 request, there's a total, the subtotal is 427 million for all of the universities, including the Board of Regents. One of those requests at Wichita State University is the Health Science Education Building. It says over $54 million for that. So is that the same building, or is this a different building?
Well, someone might want to explain that a little bit more detail, but I think it was a swap of SG, because when it triggered this, the thing that happened last year that created this $41 million issue, governor, I believe the governor's office switched some of those funds from, because when it triggered that, we got SGF to backfill that. I think they switched that SGF out for ARPA dollars. So it's not any additional dollars to the university.
Okay. Yeah, I did hear that term about the swap. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that up for the committee's awareness as we kind of move forward eventually with recommendations, that we kind of have a little bit of a knowledge, and we might dive into that a little bit deeper to see exactly the mechanics and how we got there. So
it's not an additional $54 million to the project.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from the committee? If not, I'd like to thank you, President, for being here today and your testimony, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
I would, since we do have a few minutes, I did have some questions for President Shipp. I don't know if he's willing to come back up to the podium or not, but okay. President, you had mentioned that the regional budget gap,
Yes.
and also you talked about sharing administrative costs between the regionals. Would you be able to kind of share a little bit more information about those two areas? And
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, there's kind of two different things. One has to do with, and it would just be with Emporia that we're currently starting to work with on, do we have, as positions come open, and give Ken a lot of credit, we're checking in with each other. Like, what are your plans to refill that position? If it's back of the house, and when I say back of the house, think of all your faculty are on stage, right, in critical roles in the educational enterprise. We have some administrative oversight related. Let's say, for example, a Title IX position. That's one of them that works with reported sexual assault on our campus. That position is currently, we've just filled it, but talking to Ken, it may be something that we can also share between the institutions. So in my background, I've had the fortune of working across institutions to be able to shore up some of those backstage positions where you can save an awful lot of money and reinvest it back into the educational enterprise. So that's an example of how we're starting to think differently, I guess. So that would be one thing. So how can we lower our expenses? So think of it as going halvesies on some positions that will buy us purchase for other priorities on campus. So that's that one.
Okay.
When, the regional investment, really important. I think that what we proposed was $6 million per regional institution. KBOR asked that we split that over 2 years. So that was the proposal that went forward. So each of us would receive $3 million per year over the next 2 years, if that was proposed.
Okay. And was that in the governor's budget recommendation?
No. Okay. So, but we had proposed it, KBOR had approved it, and it went to the governor.
Okay. I do know in the state of the state, the governor had indicated a lot of support for rural initiatives, rural parts of Kansas. Now, is that request, is it kind of based off of the cost model that Emporia State kind of approached the legislature with last year, and kind of coming forward with, you had talked about the thin margins?
Yeah.
And in 10 years of, maybe it's not just 10 years of stagnation, or perhaps in making decisions and right sizing and things like that.
I wouldn't disagree with what you're saying. I definitely am familiar with Ken's homework that they've done at Emporia. We have been doing similar taking cost saving measures for over a decade. So if you were to ask me, well, how much lighter are you in your personnel today versus 10 years ago? We're about 150 FTEs lower than we were 10 years ago. And so that can be anywhere from frozen faculty lines for positions where we've just absorbed that into additional work on our campus. It can be landscaping. It can be public safety. We've had to be, I think I said, really scrappy and give our CFO a lot of credit, Mr. Doug Ball, for working across the colleges over this 10-year run to deal with increasing inflation, lower enrollment. Because again, for us, I mean, it's really not overly complicated. Without a large research enterprise as a regional, you either have tuition and fee revenue or you have state support. And sometimes you have private philanthropy that floats in there. But that's really the ballgame for us. And so I think the way we've looked at it, very similar, if we were to compare kind of Emporia and Pitt State, we have about $11 million budget gap. And so we believe that there is continued cost cutting, like what I'm talking about, and how we can resolve maybe some efficiencies. But the only other way we can make up that gap is by raising tuition and fees. That's the other revenue source that we have. And if you looked at, again, our peer institutions, we've done everything we can to hold off increases in tuition and fees. Last year was one of the first years in 4 or 5 years that there was a tuition increase. So we're holding strong to that given the region and population that we serve. So that's why we really feel that a regional investment is needed to, again, kind of spin the propeller versus continue to crater the financial reality on the campus.
Thank you, President Shipp. And also, what makes the bigger difference to the university, coming forth and saying, we have this deficit that we're dealing with, and you had mentioned not trying to cut through the bone. Is it better to provide more financial aid so you get more students, hopefully the students that are choosing not to go, or what is going to make the biggest difference? I guess as a policymaker, I would kind of want to know what your thoughts on that. So
financial aid is critically important, right? It really is. I would tell you that over the last 10 years where we've lost our student enrollment, we are getting beat by the surrounding market with their financial aid packages. We aren't even close to being competitive. So there are ways to resolve that. There's really only 2 ways, right? Is that you have the choice to bring in more funded scholarship dollars if you have good philanthropy support. So that's a way you could do it. And we have amazing philanthropy support, but I don't think they can lift all that heavy lift for us. Or it's discounting. So that gets into your own pocketbook if you're going to discount tuition. So if you said, hey, I'm going to come to X university and tuition and fees were $30,000. And I was like, hey, guess what? You have a $15,000 scholarship. Well, you're going to feel special, right? Well, I got $15,000. Well, that might have not been a funded scholarship. That's just a discount that you have to remit in your overall budget. And I'll just tell you, there's a lot of institutions in trouble around the United States because they have discounted their way into a corner. So that's really no way to do it. One of the ways we can do it is through a regional investment like this, where that support from you all comes back into the university. It's like giving oxygen. So not only can you make sure that you're focused on right priority investments that go right back into the pockets of students.
Thank you very much, President, for taking the time to come back up. I just wasn't sure I was going to have time to ask you those. So thank you very much.
Should have faked like I was asleep, like my son.
Well,
I know.
No, thank you. Are there any other questions? Anybody has anything? I do note on the daily agenda as well as the weekly agenda, I had put language on there, final action on bills previously heard. I just kind of put that as a placeholder. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to work our a bill, HB 2460. We still have budget presentations to get through, so I want to make sure we're not cutting against someone else's time. So we'll continue those conversations probably next week. So no meeting scheduled tomorrow and Friday, but we do have a budget presentation by University of Kansas on Monday. So be here, no matter how the Super Bowl turns out. You have to be here, okay? But we're kind of going down the home stretch of our schedule as a budget committee. So the next few weeks will certainly pick up with activity. So please share with me any ideas or questions you may have. So with that being said, the meeting